This is a progress monitoring report on advanced placement exam performance. On this slide, we cataloged from the year 2001-02 to 2013-14 the students taking AP exams, where we have the data, the number of AP exams taken, the number of AP exams that achieve a qualifying score of 3, 4, or 5, and the AP exam pass rate, which is computed by the previous two columns. You'll notice in 2013-14, we are still waiting to get our information from the College Board. That information is embargoed until meeting with the College Board on the 17th of this month. So I do not have the number of students who have taken the AP exam that comes from them. But the number of exams taken was 18,984 this year. That is a huge increase over the previous year of 15,916, thanks in part to the board's decision to pay for all AP exams last year, and we are doing that again this year for any student who's enrolled in AP or any student who wants to take the exam again or just take the exam. You notice that the pass rate this year was 25.1%, and we've also noted that for next year, 2014-15, the advanced placement exam pass rate is 27, the target is 27%. On the following two charts, we have provided information to the board that we have provided in the past. The first chart is advanced placement core courses, that is in math, science, social studies, and English. And the second chart is elective courses. One thing I want to point out on this chart, the advanced placement core course chart, you will notice there is only one campus, and that is Roosevelt High School, and we've pointed this out for the last several years, that does not offer on campus the AP math classes. That is because there is a long-standing agreement that those students will be able to, if students wish, they can take those classes at Townview. Townview and Roosevelt, you all know, are separated by about 1.5 miles. However, we're not satisfied with that, and we want you to know that we have been working with the executive director and the principal and the same parties at Townview to actually have, we've identified an AP math teacher at Roosevelt this year who can then work with the AP math teachers at Townview to be trained so that those courses can be offered at Roosevelt next year. Just wanted to point that out. And then the next and last chart is of advanced placement elective courses offered. This oftentimes depends on a variety of factors in terms of what schools have historically done in terms of offering elective courses in AP. Of the 34 courses that College Board offers in advanced placement, this district offers all but Italian. So we have 33 different courses at 33 different exams that were administered to students. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson. Trustee Foreman. Trustee Jones?
Sorry.
I kind of cut. You want me to? I can come back.
No, it's fine. I'm very interested in advanced placement. What are, for the sake of colleges, we talk that path, there are, depending on areas, some critical ones. Can you just very quickly remind us of which AP classes are critical from the college perspective? For example, an engineering program, you need specific science and math, and if you don't have it, or you don't have at least the standard of it in the traditional classroom, some evidence of it, you're not going to find your eligibility very welcomed.
Well, actually, that depends on which engineering program you're planning to go into, because some are calculus and some are not. Some, the IB programs will be sufficient. And remember also, in terms of college-level courses, advanced placement is just one of 3 major categories that we offer: dual credit, advanced placement, and I know you know this, Trustee Jones, and International Baccalaureate. All of those have credit. Not to mention, in our engineering programs, we use Project Lead the Way's curriculum, and in their curriculum, their advanced courses actually are transcripted credit, which is a different type of college credit. So we have built that into the engineering programs that we've already incorporated into the district. But you are correct if part of what you're saying is that every individual college determines what qualifying score it requires to meet the requirement to satisfy credit for that college, and that is determined by individual departments within a college.
I think one of the additional charts I'd like to see on the advanced placement exam performance, I'd like to see that broken out socioeconomically. Well, racially, demographically, and socioeconomically. I think what we're going to see is that it's not equitably distributed. And I do think we need to take a hard look at that, especially on some of our campuses where you have subpopulations that don't reflect the total populations. And it's a little bit like having a magnet inside of a comprehensive under such a situation. I also noticed there's obviously different APs at different schools. Do people have, do students have the opportunity, because of an AP offering not in their community or local feeder pattern, to request or transfer to another school as a result of not having it where something that they want to take? I mean, I know we do that for other programmatic, but I'm just wondering, is that true for AP?
That would fall under a curriculum transfer request, and they can make that request.
So this is our current offering portfolio for this year? This is 14-15, not 13-14?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for yes, okay. It is 13. It is this year, 14-15.
My understanding is sometimes you get into a population problem. And I remember, I think it was at, there are two schools. In fact, our teacher that won the Tech Titan Award this year, if I'm remembering it right, is an AP teacher that splits his time between
Daniel Brown.
Daniel Brown, and he splits his, who, you know, big congratulations, that's huge, because that's overall the Metroplex teachers. But he splits his time, I think, between two schools.
He's actually an AP lead teacher, and he reports to our Advanced Academic Services Department. We have 12 AP lead teachers that are funded by an memorandum of understanding between the O'Donnell Foundation, TI Foundation, and NIMSI that have been in existence for about 20 years.
But it gives us an opportunity, especially when we don't have enough population, to at least still offer it versus not offering it, is what I was trying to get at. I mean, and I think that's something we need to look harder at, because it should be, this chart that I'm looking at in front of me should be complete. I mean, there shouldn't be any holes in schools. It should be, I know you know this, so. But I just want to commend, this is an area that I know this board committed to make sure we increase, and even underscored that we want programs in every school. So thank you for the update.
Thank you, Trustee Jones. Dr. Blackburn? Trustee Bingham?
Yeah. On that page where it says Advanced Placement Exam Performance, first off, I'd like to commend the district in raising the numbers of not only the amount of exams that are taken, but that are actually are passed. I'm looking, when I came on the board 2004, 2005, we only had about 1,700 kids pass an AP exam, and here we are 2013, 14, and we have 4,760, which to me is a great accomplishment. And I always get a little uneasy, because somebody will get this particular report and they'll look at 2001 and 2 and they'll say, oh my gosh, in 2001, 46.5% of the kids were passing an AP exam, and today we only have 25%. And they completely leave out the fact that we've more than doubled the number that are actually passing. So, you know, sometimes it's like you can make statistics say whatever you want. So I hope the full story gets out there, that the percentages might be lower, but the number passing is greatly increased. So kudos to the district for the wonderful work they're doing on these AP exams.
And that's new. That's a kudu. It's not a kudu. Yeah.
I could say a big yee-haw.
Yeah, you could. Trustee Nuttall.
Yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay.
And while I get excited about academics and advanced question, on the presentation, on the second column, it says students taking AP exams and number of AP exams taken. Where did this comparative data come from?
It comes from the College Board.
Okay, because I looked at, and then in 2000, when we look at our AEIS report, in 2010 and 11, the district had 33.1% of students taking AP exams. And then in 2009 and 10, we had 29.1% that were taking at the district level. And then they break that down. African Americans taking it was 25.7%. So when I was looking at the data, I didn't see, because I looked at our AEIS report that we get from 2012. Then we received a report when I got on the board that was prepared from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And to your point, Nancy, in 2008 and 9, there were 1,507 exams passed with 3 or above and 5,909. And we've come a long way since then, but I was just trying to figure out where, because I was trying to match numbers of this data. So do we look at the AEIS report? The AEIS report said advanced course dual enrollment completion in 29 was 29.1%, and 2010 and 11 was 33.1%, but our target is 27%. So in 2012, we had went way above that target with completion of advanced course placement.
I'll just be perfectly honest. I can't remember. The TEA calculates it slightly differently than we do, and I cannot remember the details. So let me get back with you on that, please.
Okay.
Because that AEIS is TEA.
This is our AEIS that's from the state. And then
a little different calculation than what we have here from the College Board.
Okay, because then in 2011, 2012, our spring enrollment total was 25.4%. So I would like this breakdown that we received, that we hadn't received by ethnicity, African American, and then on that breakdown, we counted duplicate. Can I have unduplicated numbers?
Duplicate. One student took multiple exams. Yes, that's actually on this page.
That's what's on that page.
On the front, on the first page. If
on our enrollment.
Dr. Johnson has look at the school year, then the next column, students taking AP exams. So this in the first
students taking AP exams.
Number of exams taken. So you see, I'm looking at 0102. 2,685 students took 5,188 exams. So every student took multiple exams. Maybe not every student.
I'm saying unduplicated numbers would be, we used to get the unduplicated numbers. That's AP enrollment number and percentage of how many is in AP enrolled.
You're talking about AP courses?
Yes, the enrollment.
Into AP courses.
Yeah, because this number is, for instance, my daughter takes 5 AP classes.
Right.
So she would be counted twice, 5 times.
If she took the exam, she would be counted.
No, but she has enrollment here too. She has students. Is this students taking AP exams?
That's just the students taking the exam.
So what is the enrollment of our students? Because you have to compare that.
What you're
data.
looking at is
That's
what's the enrollment in the course.
You may have 7,168 students taking an exam, but there may be 1 student's taking 8 exams. Is that making sense?
You're comparing enrollment against exam performance.
I'm saying because you may have, if you look at the data that we received, you have students in the class but necessarily not taking the exam. So I'm trying to figure out if our students are taking the exams 3 and above to get the credit, so when they go to college, if we're making them college and career ready. So this data that's presented today just talk about taking the exams. We have to look at our enrollment, and then we have to look at that enrollment further by African American, Anglo, Hispanic taking enrolled in the class, and then we peel that back and look at what classes are they taking. Because when I look back and peel the data back, our highest pass rate of outside the comprehensive high schools with large enrollments and advanced placement was Spanish, and it was at W2 White with a 30% pass rate out of 1,399 test takers. Woodrow Wilson was the next, Hillcrest was the next. The percentage of our AP classes are coming from our magnet schools, which the data we got from the administration was 41.8%. So if you take 100% scale, 41.8 is from magnet. So then when you look at your comprehensive schools, you got to see what are you doing for the comprehensive school when you talk about equity. And so one of the goals was 5 core classes. Can you tell me what are the 5 core classes that every school should have an AP?
There's 4 core classes.
Yeah, that's in the list.
That's
What
in
are the 4 that they should have? So when we're looking
something in math, science, social studies, and English.
in English. So when I look at what you presented, I'm trying to figure out, because Madison, Lincoln, South Oak Cliff, Carter, Wilma Hutchins, they all need AP on top of Roosevelt. And so comprehensive high schools with African American population, we're not closing the gap there in the AP classes.
Actually, all are offering at least 1 class in the core classes.
Well, when they take the test, they only pass 1 test out of 174 tests. They pass 2 tests out of 169 when they're attempted. Test is what, I mean, when they take that
Looking
AP.
at the test, yeah. Offer the core if the kids don't do well.
So
That's your point.
my request is this data broken down by ethnicity, looking at how many are enrolled, because that's where the board is coming. And then my request is the 2012 blue report from the College Board. But you're going to get the new report from the College Board on the 17th, right, Dr.
Correct.
Johnson?
That's correct.
But can the board receive that?
Absolutely.
Because that brings it down to what's going on in our schools. And then I would like to see pre-AP for 7th and 8th grade, because we need to make sure all our kids are getting pre-AP at 8th grade, because they have to take that Algebra 1 test in 9th grade. So are we offering across the board pre-AP algebra for all our children in our middle schools? I know the magnet schools do, but outside of that.
Just, we will get you all of those reports, not a problem at all.
I mean, there are reports that I think you guys probably have already, right?
One of the things I just want to point out that will be different in terms of analysis is that this last year in 2013-14 was the first year the district paid for all students to be able to take the AP exam. So there was a great increase in the number of students who actually took an exam. So we really are going to have to compare future years against this year as long as we continue to pay for all the exams, and we'll do some analysis on that as well. So comparing the previous years where students elected whether or not they would take it, and in some cases there might have been a financial reason why they weren't able to take it.
Didn't Acupunch, what's it called? They used to pay for our exams for the kids.
They pay for math, science, and English through the MOU that we have with the O'Donnell Foundation and the TI Foundation and NIMSI.
Are we still doing NIMSI?
The MOU actually expires this year. This year, 2014-15.
Will TI give us the data on that NIMSI report? Because NIMSI really helped out our teachers as well as our students with the training of AP. So
actually, TI does not have data on NIMSI. The district is actually working with Commit to actually look and analyze that program right now in the Evaluation and Assessment Department.
Evaluation Accountability wouldn't have that NIMSI data.
They actually are just now beginning that study.
Because I went to a training this past weekend, and they talked about pre-AP, and a school in Nashville, I think, and Garland, a district right next to us, received a part of that, having the best AP goals in the board in that arena. Garland received that. So, and NIMSI was talked about, and all about what we can do as a board to set the goals to help our kids get to that.
And the other
college and career readiness.
The other report that we're going to send you is NIMSI has some reports where they show the performance of Dallas ISD against every other school, every other major district, and Dallas ISD actually, in terms of the successful performance of achieving qualifying scores for our minority students, it's higher than any other district in the country. Yes, and so we will also get you that information.
Yeah, because they said another school.
We should be celebrating that. I mean, that should be front and center. Excuse me.
Take care.
I just, if they can give me that data, because I'm of that. I'm just trying to figure out where the numbers.
No, me too. I didn't know he was back there.
All right, Trustee Cowan.
No, just quickly, I agree. I think just seeing more data, especially on how many students we have in the courses, it's just a good reference point, especially when we're looking at exams taken and pass rates. Now the stupid question of the day, if they don't pass the exam, what happens?
Not passing the exam means you had a score of 1 or 2 on the exam. It means that the student was actually exposed to rigor in the classroom for the entire year. And that's positive, no matter what. Students can elect, if, for instance, you took a class sophomore year or junior year, and you thought maybe you would do better if you wanted to take it senior year, you can take the exam again, and in fact, we are going to pay if you choose to elect to do that. Actually, a number of students do that, just that. They may not be satisfied with the score that they got, and as they learn other things in that same subject matter, they do better, and they go back and take the exam again and may get a qualifying score.
I like that our kids are challenging themselves. I just also don't want them to feel beaten down because they don't feel like they can pass it too. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cowan. Trustee Morath?
I got 20 minutes of questions to ask on this topic area.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was going to have to stop you at 10 and make sure anybody else had questions, and we'd come back to you. Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson, for Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson? Just want to make sure I got that right. That was hard-earned. Thank you very much for the update. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Trustees, we are now on to policy updates. Trustee Cowan, would you please lead us through these policies?
Try. First item 6A1, discussion of amendment to board policy CDC, local, other revenues, grants from private sources, sponsored by Jim Terry. This item is being presented as a discussion item at the request of Trustee Morath and the administration. Proposed amendments to CDC local will align with the changes in CH local on the amount of money to be accepted only by board action. An additional amendment to this policy is made to change the online database name where district donation records are kept.
Good evening, board members, President, Superintendent Miles. With this changes in the policy, we're asking for is that we will bring to the board all gifts over 150K, just as we do for purchases, and all gifts under 150 would be considered accepted by the superintendent and or his designee. And that's basically the two changes that we have made in this policy.
Trustee Foreman, do you want to start?
Thank you. How does CDC local correlate to CH local?
Well, CDC is about grants from private sources, other revenues. CHC is procurement purchases.
So again, how does that correlate? Why should they be the same? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, just in terms of how, at what level does the board want to look at items?
Okay, so there's no real correlation.
No.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. And this went from a value of $25?
Oh, 25,000.
25,000. I couldn't hardly see that. It's not on there. 25,000 to 150,000.
Correct.
With no real correlation to the two. As a board member, I want to see and understand and accept whatever donations that people are bringing forward, so I have a clear understanding as to what we're getting and who's doing it and why. And just presenting me with a list of those people who bring forth the donation doesn't really suffice for me, because I need an understanding. I'm grateful for any donation, but what I see happening, unfortunately, is that the board's responsibility seems to be moving further and further away from the board. And every time there is a question, and I'm not directing you to this time.
Okay.
Every time there is a question about any initiative or item or anything, the next thing we get is a change to our policy presented to us. I think that we should be accepting of the fact that this board has a responsibility to be looking at what is going on in this district and to continue to try to change policies. How far away are we going to get, Trustee Cowan? How far away are we going to get from it? We can't run from our responsibilities, Trustee Cowan.
What do you mean?
You're the policy guy. So I'm talking to the guy who voted for it. We can't get away from our responsibilities as trustees. And so I have a severe problem with moving forward with $150,000. I think that we need to stay where we are and step up to the plate and understand that it is our responsibility as trustees to be accepting the gifts and understand what is actually going into our schools and into our districts. I won't know what's going into my schools, and I don't like that. Thank you.
Trustee Jones, do you have anything?
Yeah, can I get some, I'm going to take a little different tack than with Trustee Foreman, but sort of along the same lines. The original threshold, or the threshold we're currently working from is $25,000.
Yes.
And is that per gift or per donor?
Per gift.
So a donor can make a series of gifts under $25K and aggregate to $1 million if that's their desire, and that would fall below the current threshold.
I believe that's correct.
So it wouldn't have come to the board. But do we have a policy with respect to total value or just the individual gift?
Individual gifts.
So that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so what was the logic, since this obviously precedes many of us on this board, of $25K? Why did it start there? I mean, I would think, logically, we would be interested in large numbers, and what's the need for the why the $25K to come to the board? What was that all about?
Well, I believe by law, it doesn't have to be brought to the board at all. By law, I think the superintendent can accept all gifts. I think it is the local policy that was written before my time.
Well, mine time too, but is there any sort of understanding of why the $25K threshold was ever set? Now, do other districts,
I would assume that it was set when the purchases that had come to the board was over $25K, would be my adjustment.
Okay. So we have no understanding of the history on why the given amount, and all we're talking about right now is amount, was set in policy at $25K. And the only reason I'm asking this is that we have, there's always the consideration about the things that come with board review. So conflicts of interest is a good example. We've seen donations that are dressed up as a donation, but we're also doing procurements with the same entities. And we've had conversations at the board table about how things are reflected and also whether gifts come with strings and how those strings are otherwise incorporated into our objectives and our goals and so forth. Now, I'm not one to turn away money, and certainly I think there's wisdom in changing maybe the limit. And I think, if I'm remembering it right, the logic of that was to try to not have to go through every item and board time. But my recollection of this area versus procurement is normally we're doing a little celebration at the board table, thanking our donors, which gives us a public opportunity to recognize them as a board and as a district. And we don't spend, just from, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, a whole lot of time digging in unless we perceive there's a conflict or some other consideration that the board should otherwise review. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. So the amount doesn't, I guess I'm just having trouble here on why we make any change at all. And frankly, I like to thank donors as a board. I think that's in our interest, and also important that we collectively as a district recognize those generous enough to support the district.
Hello, Trustee Jones. It was also to get the gifts to the students quicker. As you noticed, like last time we had the uniforms that were ratified, And so we don't have to come to the board. We can accept a gift and get the gift to the necessary place when appropriate.
So the question then, so there's a question of time, okay, and that's interesting. I guess I would need to understand that on what standard we're accepting a gift. In that vein, if we were to remove the board from that, there would need to be some pretty strong criteria, because again, it comes back to you don't want conflicts, you don't want situations that are inequitable or otherwise don't define.
It still goes through the process, like legal does review it. It still goes through the complete process. It's just that we don't have to bring it to the board and wait for the board's final approval in order to accept the gift.
Fair enough. So I guess my request would be to understand what is the process.
Okay.
So absent the board, what is that? And, again, I want to make sure the conflicts question and other related considerations that come up.
And all items, gifts over $5,000 will still come through the ERCO officer.
That's great, but I still want to make sure we got that as a tight system.
Chart type
Thank
thing.
you so much, yes.
To keep in the same vein, just very, very briefly, I agree with that. I think that definitely we need to make sure we know what the process is and ensure that if there are any conflicts, I hope we're already doing that. But it would be nice to know that information to inform a potential policy change. I don't believe that this correlates directly to the procurement conversation that we had months back, but I'm looking at this not so much as this idea of celebration. I get that. We should be celebrating gifts, but I'm also looking at the utility component of this, and that is when you have a school who needs a gift immediately, and it gets tied up in a month-long conversation, and then a vote, and potentially, depending on if we accept the gift or not, maybe. Yeah, okay, so yeah, the process. Thank you, but the process is a long process for some of these schools who need those gifts immediately. That's what I'm concerned about, and that's why a policy like this I would be in support of. I'm not sure if $150,000 is the right number. It could be more than that. If you remember back on other conversations, I was in support of a higher amount for the procurement component. We're not talking about that now, but we have an opportunity to really look hard at what the number should be. So it would be interesting to see the data on some of the recent gifts that you have mentioned, were directly impacting schools and their inability to be able to move forward with programs. How much were those gifts, and how long did it actually take those schools to get the gifts? And what were some of the ramifications of not getting those gifts by a specific date? What did that do to those campuses and their ability to be able to provide an excellent education for the kids? That's going to be helpful for me in making a particular decision on this policy.
Can we do about a 3-month snapshot?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Liaison.
Well, I think that if we have somebody who is generous in the district, I certainly think they probably want that money to go into the classrooms as quickly as possible. And I do know that it is not immediate because of the board approval, anywhere from 60 to 90 days to 120. If it's in the summertime, it could be even longer. So I think the faster, the better. And I'm sure that if I were to give $149,000 to a school for some kind, I think that they would probably celebrate in some way in a manner that would be pleasing to me. And I'm sure our district sends thank you cards, and we do all sorts of things to let our people that donate, to let them know that we really do appreciate it. And certainly the individual schools that receive these, they can reciprocate. So there's nothing in this policy that says we can't celebrate on it, if it's less than or more than a certain amount, right? Yeah, so I think this is probably a good policy. So thank you, administration, for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
I think the reason this policy was at the threshold of 25,000 is because I think there needs to be some, I don't see a regulation behind this. There needs to be some consistency of ensuring and covering that employee that if they accepted computers, there was a process of accountability for employees to know that those computers were accepted. And I think that's why things came to the board when they presented this policy, because if you look, you want to ensure that you don't have bribery and some other things, and illegal gifts or things of that nature. That's minor gifts, but I can see where there needs to be clear processes going on with our schools and our district, because you accept gifts and we don't have where's the accountability of that gift, and when you leave the district or whatever happened, there needs to be a clear guideline and process of how gifts are going to be accepted. I know in South Dallas, someone's trying to give a school some land. Donate it. I mean, that just needs, I see the reason for.
Is it in the floodplain?
I'm just saying, there needs to be, because you can have leadership that just take everything and anything, and then you're in this conundrum. So I think the amount should be less. It should be 50,000, and then until you get, is there a regulation? Because I couldn't find one.
I don't think we have one yet.
Yeah.
I mean, there are no guidelines. You're just going to accept it, so schools can say, I'm going to accept whatever up to 150,000, and then next thing you know, a donor said they gave a school $100,000, or gave a school this product, and then the next thing you know, you just don't know the accountability. I don't see the accountability for the students, and I don't think students have not received things because of the board. I think they receive it, and we've never had this problem before, so it's ironic to me. Since 2009, there's always been a process to accepting gifts and donations, because you have to give, even a donation, you have to give it a value. So, this is the first read, correct?
Correct.
So who bought it, administration or who bought this to the?
I asked for this
I
probably
brought it
6 months
forward.
ago.
And there is a process that we use.
There is a process.
Yes.
I want to bring some.
Right. There is a regulation.
There's a regulation. Can you give us the regulation?
CDC regulation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There's guidelines.
Exhibits with it.
This is first read, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, Trustee Murrah.
So I know of 3 examples where the current policy has caused active harm to our students in terms of denying them resources. In 2 of those cases, it was simply a delay. It was a delay of anywhere from, I think one of the examples was 3 months, one of the examples was 6 because it overlapped summer. In the 3rd example, the donor decided to skip the ISD entirely, just because of the hassle of the paperwork. I have interactions with people regularly that want to have nothing to do with the board, so they're always afraid of any board action. In any event, we've recently changed our procurement threshold. We, the board, as a body corporate, decide what is and is not in our purview. So we can decide to have conversations about $100,000 donations, or we can decide to have conversations about $800 million worth of spending in terms of employee incentives. And so I, for one, prefer to spend our time on the much bigger issues than the smaller issues, and this gets us out of some of the smaller areas, and it will, I think, allow for an increase in speed of delivery of gifts to our campuses. That being said, trustees, you also have in front of you a proposed amendment to this language, and this is not, of course, the last month. We have to talk about this 2 months. And so in the proposed changes that I'm suggesting, one is in the area where you see major gifts, where the $150,000 threshold shall be associated with individual donations rather than individual donors. And the second one is that it's a request that the administration develop regulations to facilitate extremely fast processes for acceptance of gifts. That's what those 2 are. So anyways, that's my logic. That was my logic for 6 months, asking the administration to take a look at this. And when this proceeds in 2 months, I will definitely be voting in favor of it.
Please note that that policy is not what's online. It's the one that was passed out to you because that last provision, so you should have it in front of you.
Trustee Foreman. It's...
How many gifts do we get per year?
We get 2759 is what we got last year, and in 2012, 2013, 1784.
1784, 1,784. And so we just got cited an instance of maybe 3 last year that was a problem. And that is forcing us to change our policy. And I ask that question only because, again, I'm a visual person who need to understand what's going on. A lot of the board members interact with a lot of different agencies and companies. So how will we know when there's a conflict? If you're accepting a gift, or the superintendent is accepting a gift, how are you going to know when there is a conflict with some of these board members?
We usually run it through legal. And
how would legal know in some cases? Because legal doesn't know everybody that these people are engaged with.
We ask them to disclose if they've got an ownership. I mean, it's the same thing that we would do now.
Okay, you ask them to disclose if they have an ownership after you've accepted the gift? After you?
No, in the process.
I'm just trying to understand, because if the superintendent is going to be charged with accepting the gifts and the board won't know what gifts they are, how are we going to know where there is a conflict with an individual up here?
It's also part of the audit process is that the audit will send letters and you all have to disclose any relationships that you have with vendors.
So I clearly understand some of that, but that's with vendors. That's not necessarily with donors. There's a difference.
Well, I'd also ask if you've received any gifts and the amount of money and gifts that you've received.
What if you're accepting something, Jim, from somebody that Bernadette is working with in her after school or summer program? Would you know that?
She has to disclose it.
And I asked that question. You keep saying that, but what we're talking about here is after the fact. It would be after the fact if the superintendent begins to accept that. So the conflicts bother me a lot in terms of how this is going to work. And Paula, you talked about the uniforms. The uniforms were ratified. The students already have them. But you use that as an example. They were ratified. The students already had the gift. And so I am a person that hates the word ratified, but in any situation where the students are involved and there's something going directly to the students, if you notice, I will vote for that because that is for the students going directly. So in this conversation, I haven't heard of any severe problems with the current process. 1,700 is what we had last year?
From 2012, 2013.
1,700. And last year?
2,759.
2,759. No. That's the number of donations.
Of contributions that
different contributions that we received. So 2,700 companies or people gave us donations. Is that correct?
13, 14.
1,700.
All I'm saying is that you're looking at not even 1% of an issue. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Trustee Jones.
Thank you. You know, first rule of public sector anything is sunshine is the best disinfectant. And part of the issue of potentially putting it before the board is to make sure, number one, the public has notice in a meaningful way, and the second is to make sure that all the potential conflicts are aired out. I mean, that's just the logic from what I understand. In gifts policy, we have two areas that we've got to be concerned with. One is against E-rate, which is no small matter for us. And the other is the timing relationship. Now, of the 1784, what was that total? What was the value?
Value was 4.6 million.
And on the 2759, what was the value?
12.1.
And are these actual dollars, or are these also in-kind values?
In-kind values as well.
So that's another issue, because it's a question that's hit me before, is who does the valuation? Because you're given a tax receipt at the end of the day for the value. And that's something that I would think we should also be concerned with because of IRS rules and other things that we've got to be compliant with. And it has to be a real donation. So I don't know all the pieces, but my sense is this is something we really need to look a little closer to. I'm not against trying to improve the process, make it more efficient, make it more effective, get it, to the obvious beneficiary, which is the student, quicker. But the scrutiny on a gift is not something that I think we should take lightly given these other considerations. And just lastly, how many gifts did this board ever turn down last year? And of the 2759, how many did we actually look at?
So you looked...
How many came before the board on the 2759? For argument's sake.
So you looked at probably about 1,000.
So less than half.
Yes.
And of the less than half, that meant that they were above the 25,000 threshold. How many of those did we ever turn down?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So the issue, it sounds like, is really time and the ability to be more effective and efficient at getting it through. It's not necessarily a threshold issue, I would imagine. And I'm just hypothesizing here, but...
And just for clarification, even though it doesn't come to the board, it runs the same process of going through legal and going through the...
And that's the way that should be.
Yeah,
So I mean, no question. What we're talking about is levels. And what we're talking about is timing and levels, but also the requirement around scrutiny at different levels. This change also says it's on the donation, not the donor. And that's another consideration, which we haven't really discussed, but some things we should be analyzing and understanding the ramifications on all levels. So, I mean, anything that makes it easier to take a gift and get it to a child, I'm 1,000% for, but not at the expense of areas where we increase our risk or exposure or other liability or even potential conflict, inadvertent conflicts scenarios, and we still have a duty. So, thank you.
Is the onus on the board? I mean, because you said it has to go through the same process, legal. I mean, so to understand that process, it seems like you're blaming the board for something that is administrative. If it has to go through these processes, it's still going to have to go through the same processes to get approved either way. And then it's like, as one of the trustees said, that the board people don't want to give money to the board. I mean, it's not about the board, it's about the children. So if you want to give and help children, you're going to help children in spite of. You're going to give to the children. So I'm just trying to figure out why we're talking about this now, when the onus is we need to make sure we do our part on administratively to make sure the process is timely and it's not held up in legal, it's not held up in I mean, a prime example with the Cotton Bowl. South Dallas has been trying to have the South Dallas Cotton Bowl, but what happened is it got held up because all the people were gone in athletics, and I mean, that was not the donation from the city's fault, that was on our side. So there's some other sides to this. So we're changing the amount for something that we can correct through our actions.
Just quickly, while you're reviewing this policy, Jim, can you also look at the first paragraph? Do we have a grants council?
I'm not aware of a grants councils, but yeah, I'll look at that.
So if we're looking to change the policy, I would like administration to weigh in on that first paragraph. I think a sunset provision is probably worth reviewing on the policy level, but I mean, it seems like if we're not doing it, we either need to take it out or change it. Okay. Thank you. All right, moving on. 6A2, discussion of amendment to board policy CH local purchasing and acquisition sponsored by Jim Terry. This item is being presented as a discussion item at the request of administration. Proposed amendments to CH local are to clarify in detail on page 10 of 22 what are authorized transactions to include what must be ratified by the board. On page 11 of 22, unauthorized transactions are clarified in detail with a sentence added. Is there any discussion?
We're trying to do what, Mr. Chair?
This is to clarify what we thought was very convoluted language, and working with legal, we think we have a much clarifying presentation here, which essentially says that, you know, what is considered an unauthorized transactions, and what unauthorized transactions we will bring to the board, and what unauthorized transactions are what transactions we would proceed with administrative process and not bring to the board. So, let me give you an example. So, if we had brought to the board an agenda item for the purchase of particular items, and if so as board approval, and there was an approved contract, and then there was a lack of a purchase order, which we require administratively was not issued, we would take care of that administratively, and we would not bring to the board for ratification. Trustee Farmer.
Jim.
Yes.
I would assume that the change of this policy came after the ratification of 8.3 million?
Well, the 8.9 million was brought to you last month.
Okay, and at the same time, 3 million ratification was brought to us at the same time?
There was a 3.4 million ratification also brought to you, yes.
And at the same time, there was $400,000 brought to us that was spent on a voided contract. Is that correct?
No.
No?
No.
Help me.
Yeah. I will say that all those ratifications that you're talking about would still come to the board. This is only talking about there were some minor ratifications, 31,000, 15,000, some that were what we would call administrative errors, in that a PO was not entered into the system, but as I say, had already had prior board approval and had valid contracts.
Let me understand clearly something you said. If there is a contract already,
yes,
and the department does not get a purchase order, that instead of it coming to the board for ratification, you would have these administrative actions against whomever.
Yes, there would be.
I understand that clearly?
Yes, there would be administrative consequences.
Okay. So
laid out in the Regulation D.
So now we know the 8.9 million.
That would not have fallen.
Let me finish my question.
Sorry.
You're getting ahead of me. You know the 8.9 million. Part of the problem is that they did not have purchase orders. They had a contract, but there were not purchase orders. Correct?
They had a contract.
But there were not purchase orders. There were purchase orders?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you come on up here and help? Come on up here.
I mean, you're prettier than me.
This is for the inside public sector, the 8.9. They did have purchase orders.
So how were they paid?
They were paid via the purchase order with an invoice that goes through the system and a check.
That wasn't my understanding. My understanding were those particular ones were paid through accounts payable through a check request and not a purchase order.
That was AT&T.
So that was the 8
The 3.4 million, the AT&T contracts.
So there was only one contract that went around the system and went to accounts payable.
2 separate ones.
And what was the other one?
The other one was the Telwest contract.
Okay, and they did the same thing, correct?
Correct.
So, with this new policy, would those be brought to the board for ratification? Or would the administrative penalties that you're speaking of be enforced rather than
The administrative penalties would have been enforced, but they also would have been brought back to the board because they went over the 25% expenditure for the contract amount.
Where does that say that in this proposed policy?
Correct.
Yes, we are.
Are we getting a little bit ahead? This is the... But I'm asking in regards to transactions that took place that probably precipitated this action of changing the policy.
No.
So the fact of the matter is, I have to stay where I am, and I'm trying to understand where in this policy, this proposed new policy, does it say that those particular purchases are similar purchases? Is that close enough, attorney? Would come back to the board.
To exceed the board authorization, the one that you mentioned for the $8.9 million, the board had authorized the district to spend 30, and it was 8.9 over the board authorization, which is a separate issue. That would always have to come back to the board.
So where does it say in this policy, proposed policy, that the over 25% threshold will come back to the board?
That
it might be in state law, but
it's also policy.
Could it state that in this policy? Because one of the things we do is we consistently chase around and try to find this policy, that policy, this policy, that policy. And I like to see things right in front of me so I know what I'm working from.
That policy is on page 13 of 22 in CH Local.
Okay. So, again, my question is, why can't it say that in this policy or something to that effect? Because what I'm concerned about is that there is a move to stop bringing ratifications to the board, and that's my concern. Is there is this move to stop bringing ratifications to the board, so therefore the board really doesn't know what's going on. And while I have a lot of faith and trust in the employees in terms of exercising some kind of penalty for other employees, as a board member, I need to understand what is going on. It is our responsibility. It's our responsibility to know what is going on and why it's going on. And again, I'll make this statement and I'll be through for the moment, is that every time an issue comes up, there's an immediate attempt to change a policy. That's not the way we should be doing this. That's not the way we should be doing this. We should be trying to stay on the right path and not always trying to change a policy to affect what you want.
Yeah, has the auditor reviewed this?
Yes.
And do they have any sort of written commentary about the language that says that?
No.
Okay, I would like to see a specific response to the part where if the board has previously approved the dollar amount to be spent in the time period of the transaction and a contract has been fully signed and authorized by authorized staff, a transaction that is unauthorized, keyword here, unauthorized, because of the failure, important word, to follow established administrative procedures shall not require board ratification. Employees who fail to follow established administrative procedures will be subject to disciplinary action. Now, I am very interested in how they would view that. Part of the problem is this gets around transparency and other requirements on disclosure. I'm not necessarily against the notion that, you know, aspects of this could be otherwise adjusted to deal with some of the challenges we've run into, but I'm very concerned about the key words here being unauthorized and failure. And there's no control from the board or the oversight and transparency side. So the second thing that is interesting in the statement of change is employees who fail to follow established administrative procedures will be subject to disciplinary action. I'd like to know what types of disciplinary action and how that process would work, because that's no small matter as well.
We'll provide you the regulation.
Yeah, that would be helpful. And just so I'm clear, what's the problem we're trying to solve with this change?
We think that this was the intent, the way that it was written, and what we've done here is we've asked legal to help us clarify what we believe was the original intent of the authors of this local policy.
And this has this been vetted by the ERCO? Well, you're the ERCO, but by some E-rate compliance, not you. I mean, somebody who's independent to evaluate the...
Well, I will take this back to internal audit to make sure that they have commented on it, and I'll have them write up a comment, and we will provide that answer to you.
That'd be great, and also I'd like the view of the external auditor as well. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what was?
I would like the view of the external, not just the internal auditor, but the external auditor, because this has other implications.
You're referring to Deloitte or our E-rate attorney?
Well, it would be both, because you have two separate areas for which this would apply. Well, or just it's an opinion on, I just want an independent view on it. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, on page 10 and 11 of 22, I want to thank you for the real precise language. It really spells it out very clearly, leaves not any room for doubt as to what is expected. So thank you for bringing this forward.
I agree with Trustee Foreman and it seems to me that we should be already doing, if the board unauthorized and punishment, disciplinary action, that should already be a standard. I don't understand why we're putting it now when the board has previously approved the dollar amount to be spent in the time period of the transaction. A contract has been fully signed. Well, we're in this predicament because something happened in our processes and our procedures. That's why we're here. So it seems to me that administration needs to fix the processes and procedures and the checks and balances, and we wouldn't be in this predicament. Ratification happens after. You know, there's some exceptions to the rules. A donation needs to be given. You have to ratify. But when it comes to, when you look at CH legal policy and look at CH local legal deals with our purchasing, our procurement, and how we should govern ourselves with fair, legal, and consistent practices. So for us to look at CH legal and then look at CH local, to me, they're not going together. They're not, it's not a puzzle piece. The piece is off. So I don't agree with ratification of transaction, because when you look at the ratification, I forgot to do something. So who's accountable? Who's responsible? Once again, we want teachers, we want principals, we want to be accountable. Students to come to school, we hold them accountable, but yet when you look at this policy, unauthorized because of failure to follow established administrative procedure shall not require board ratification. That is unauthorized. So number one, you shouldn't be doing it anyway, because of the failure of lack of your responsibility to follow established administrative procedure shall not require board ratification. So if you have an you do something that's unauthorized and you failure to follow, it shall not require board ratification. Employees who fail to follow established administrative procedure, and I thought you were putting in all these procedures. To me, it's a bigger issue, and it's not a policy issue. That's right. This is not a policy issue. This is a a people issue, that we need to ensure that we're following the policies in the contract, the PO, whatever we need to do.
We brought these ratifications to you, and all I'm doing is clarifying, and in fact we are, but we feel that, and I agree certainly with the legal, that the board you've approved, you in fact have approved the transaction. When you approve the amount, you also, the contract is an approved contract, so they made an administrative error, which we will hold them accountable to. And so what will happen is that that error, we will take care of that administratively. But you know, if you've already approved the amount to be spent, and if the contract is in place, and somebody is not administratively doing the right thing, then we're taking care of it.
And if I might, I think I agree. It's not a policy issue. It's an administrative issue, and it's an accountability issue. We're not lowering accountability. We're going to be raising accountability. That's why the language is so tough. In the language, it spells out that there'll be penalties, and so we will have accountability. Yes, we're holding teachers accountable, principals, everybody accountable. But when teachers make mistakes, we don't bring it to the board. We deal with it administratively, and that goes for custodians, everybody else. And so this is just being consistent with other practices that we have.
But that's not a board to bring a teacher's mistake to the board. That's not our responsibility. This is our responsibility to govern the money, to make sure the money's there. So, however, once again, this to me is not a policy. If you this is not ratification. I don't support this. I think we should look at CH Legal that deals with procurement, and the policy is not matching, local is not matching legal, and I welcome the legal opinion about, I don't see where legal is matching local policy, and that needs to be. That should be happening anyway.
Trustee Moran.
Jim, this follows on the memo that you sent us 2 or 3 months back.
Correct.
In your attempt to clean up the processes, both administrative and policies, that are weak at the board level.
Correct.
So I want to turn to one sentence here, which is on a page, I think it's page 11. It's in the existing policy, not proposed for change. In the section on unauthorized transactions, the second paragraph there, the third sentence, it says the board may ratify any otherwise unauthorized transaction. And I believe that is basically the source of confusion that you are attempting to clean up, because as I interpret this policy, whether you bring ratifications or not to the board is entirely your discretion right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
So this board could never see any ratifications if the administration decided to simply stop bringing them. That's what's allowed under current policy.
Correct.
Okay. So the trustees today that are arguing against the language that you've proposed would like to keep that authority in the administration's bailiwick to sort of maximize confusion as to what you do and do not bring. At least that's one way for me to interpret the stance on the language. So the clarifying language that you provide is above that and actually below that to indicate precisely when you will be bringing ratifications to the board, right, so that under no circumstance could a replacement to you hide ratifications from the board in the future.
Correct.
Okay. So much like in the past, previous CFOs could have in fact hidden ratifications from the board given current policy. This corrects that for now and moving forward.
I believe it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Foreman?
Yeah. If you don't bring ratifications to the board, how does that work?
I don't. I do. I bring all ratifications to the board.
That's not my question. I'm responding to Trustee Moran. If you don't bring ratifications to the board, you can just move forward with those payments without bringing them forward?
I think you need to ask the question, what's ratification? Well, ratification is an unauthorized transaction, meaning the board has not authorized. And my interpretation here, and the legal interpretation, is this has already been approved by the board.
That's not my question.
Okay. My misunderstanding.
You did. My question to you is that it was said that you don't have to bring ratifications to this board, and you answered yes. So again, my question is, what is the process for an unauthorized expenditure if you don't bring it to the board for ratification?
The process? The process in terms of what? The process in terms of paying bills? Because that's what we're talking about here.
It's not about paying bills, Jim. Don't mince words with me.
Understand
My
you.
question
Ms. Foreman.
again is, maybe I'm not clear.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a ISD graduate, so I might not be correct.
Congratulations.
But I'm trying to understand, the statement was made that you don't have to bring ratifications, which are unauthorized purchases, before the board. And you agreed to that. So I'm trying to figure out what is the process if you don't bring those unauthorized purchases before the board.
That's right.
Yes, my lawyer's here to help out.
He's my lawyer too.
Yeah, I represent everybody here. It's not all. It's just if the board has approved this, the board has voted on it, the money has been approved, and then there's a contract that we have entered into with Jim Terry to perform those services that the board has approved. And then through some administrative whatever, there's not a purchase order issued. In those cases, would that not have to come back to the board because you've already approved it and we've already got a contract?
What's different with that than what we currently do today? Because I still haven't gotten the answer.
Currently have to bring those back.
That's the answer that I was looking for, which I already know. Is that the answer to Trustee Morath was that he doesn't have to bring those before us, and so that was my question. So I got that now. That's clear. You do have to bring them back before.
Currently.
You do currently.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that thank you, attorney. There is a responsibility that this board has, and it's not about Superintendent Miles if teachers get in trouble. It's not about bringing that before us. There's a fiducial responsibility that this board has to make sure that the district is doing the right thing by the funds. It has nothing to do with if I want to see ratifications. But what I will say, if in fact what you say you're going to put in place should stop ratifications, then why do you need a policy change?
It's for clarification.
It's really not clarification, it's a change. And again, we don't want to mince words. It's a change from what we currently do. So, it's not clarification to me. It's a change from what we currently do. And if the administration is going to do what they say they're going to do in terms of holding employees accountable, why do we need a change?
I'm going to throw mud in the water.
I think the superintendent was trying to answer me.
Sorry.
I can answer. I mean, there's a balance between policy and operations and how we do administrative procedure. Yes, the board has a fiduciary responsibility. Nothing in this policy change is going to reduce the board's ability to do that, because we will only, we're going to follow the board's guidance and will through board documents and through the board agenda and board approval of all expenditures as required by policy. The change is only for those administrative procedures that don't affect the bottom line, where our employees have not followed our policies and procedures, even the most rigorous ones that we have. We have 20,000 employees, we have hundreds of contracts, and so in the future we anticipate someone making a mistake, and that's a mistake. If it's an administrative mistake, we should deal with that, and the board should not have to debate that at this table.
And I think, and I'll be through, I don't think it's a debate. I think it's an understanding of what's going on with this district and how funds are being spent. And as the board continues to give away its responsibility, I have a problem with that. And there's nothing that is indicated to me that there needs to be a policy change.
Johnson?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on a comment that was made. I'm neither for nor against this. I'm just trying to understand it. My issue has to do with the question of disclosure. Now, if the current scenario is the disclosure is not required, but we do it anyway, and this would, as long as this wouldn't change, I mean, there's a reason we would do it, right? I mean, and that reason is what again, Jim?
Well, we're just clarifying it. We believe that the board, in fact, has already authorized it, and in fact, we have a good contract, and it's an administrative error on the part of the employee. And
but you bring those disclosures voluntarily now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so those are disclosures you're bringing. So how do we ensure those disclosures are always brought? Shouldn't the language reflect that we always want the disclosure? Isn't that really the goal here?
We certainly could provide you a list.
I mean, to me, I think we're mixing elements, and that's concerning to me. The language as I read it isn't the way it's being represented in terms of what it impacts, because this is saying that in effect that the board would not be, it would not be brought back to the board is the way I read that paragraph, which is why I want to have an understanding of the auditor's view, the internal auditor's view, and whether this violates one of the controls that otherwise is in place. I mean, boards have a responsibility to be part of that check and balance process. It's you know, tedious to some members of this board, but it is our duty as it's described in our governance responsibilities. So I would like just certain assurances if we're going to move forward with this. I'd also like to make sure we're all clear about what we're moving forward with.
I am not lowering any controls. I won't lower any controls.
You are the master of controls. You know, we are a fortunate moment in time in terms of this district for many years didn't have any controls, and now we've got a proactive approach. No one's trying to get in the way of that. In fact, I salute you for the incredible heavy lifting you've been doing over the last few years, and also building upon those that came before you who started all of that and put this district on the right path. That being said, there's still checks and balances, and it takes nothing away from what you're doing on the control side. It just simply allows there to be that transparency and that accountability component. And so those are my concerns, those are my issues. I'm not against this, I'm not for this. I just would like better understanding about it. And I'm glad we're having this discussion. Thank you.
It's Elise. Trustee Nuttall, any last one? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item 6A3, discussion of DBA local employee requirements and restrictions, credentials and records. This is also our first read, being brought by Carmen DeVille. This item is being presented as a discussion item. It is recommended that DBA local be revised to include TASB recommendations from Update 98. The provision states the district will not use an employee's social security number as an employee identifier except for tax purposes. Yes, ma'am.
Questions? It's a TASB update. So just to provide the context, in addition to what Trustee Cowan mentioned, it's just providing some additional context with regard to social security number. We are already in compliance with what's being requested, but it needs to be added to policy.
Okay, Trustee Foreman?
I'm more interested in the parent notification, which is at the top. And I see there's a change. You didn't speak about that.
The clarification of language, you see how it was written before. However, notification shall not be required, so on and so forth. So it's switching the words to add clarity there.
The district shall notify parents of students in classrooms where their teacher is not highly qualified, as required by law. Notification shall not be required. That's a contradictory of statements. If it's the law, am I wrong?
I think you got to keep reading. Should not be required when. Yeah. It just lays out items that.
Additional items.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions about DBA?
Second, I'm sorry, could you go back? I was just
Sure.
reading. Thank you. It was that part about the three.
Go up.
Yeah, thank you. When the strike on the following three criteria are met, why was that taken out? Because that's saying all three criteria must be met, and striking that, what's the implication? That only one has to be met, or you just have to meet a condition, or how would that work?
It wasn't really necessary.
Well,
It's still all three of them.
Yeah, then why would we strike, then why would that language be struck? Because it gives the opportunity, I mean, it just, striking it out, there's no requirement. I mean, unless that's in law or somewhere else.
It's
Yeah,
the
it's TASB's recommendation.
It comes directly from TASB?
Right.
Wow, I'd be interested to know how that changes the requirements. I mean, it shouldn't, but it's explicit when you say three criteria are met, and then you don't say it, and there's three criteria, and maybe you meet one. You know, if the requirement is three, no matter what, then why would that language have gone away? It's just worth asking. I mean, I have no issue with this. It's just the language.
We'll go back and look, because it's the first read to me.
Thank you so much.
All right. 6A4, discussion of DEA local compensation and benefits, wage and hour laws, sponsored by Carmen DeVille. This is also first read. Being presented as a discussion item recommending that DEA be revised to update language to allow for alternative work arrangements. Also throughout the policy, the district's web address is indicated for reference for compensation and benefit information. Trustee Nuttall?
Can you add on to this
Sure. You want me to explain the underline section at the bottom?
Yeah, so we're adding this correct.
Correct. So this language basically says that it will be considered that if employees are seeking an alternative work arrangement in certain work groups, this would now be a possibility outlined in policy.
So, in an effort to attract and retain the best talent, the superintendent school designee may recommend alternative work arrangements. So, does that mean like teacher at school A in North Dallas, the superintendent can recommend that teacher is moved to a school in South Oak Cliff?
No, that's not the work situations that they're talking about. They're talking about situations where an employee performs a job function that is not necessarily impacted by being physically present on site regularly, but is a talented individual that might need some adjusted work arrangement. So they could work remotely or something like that.
So people can work at home?
Possibly, yes.
And so what are the regulations that's going to guide that determines who works at home and how is it the biometric time clock and clocking in and clocking out, and what are some of the reasons that you get to work at home and how your day is going to be?
Sure. So the way that there's a regulation that will accompany DEA local, and essentially the employee who is seeking an alternative arrangement can submit a form up to their supervisor that will come all the way up to the cabinet level for review in terms of a justification of why they're seeking an alternative arrangement. With regard to the bio clock, they're not going to clock in using the bio clock because they won't necessarily be on site. For example, a certain employee who has an alternative work arrangement who does come in certain days can clock in while they're here. Otherwise, if they're not here, they would follow the procedures for turning in their time accordingly.
So it's you. So who qualifies for this alternative work arrangement?
The people who qualify would come through the process with the form of approval that I just outlined. So if I had an employee who was interested in working at an alternative location on some alternative schedule, they could submit that form to their manager, which would go to their supervisor, that would come up through me, that I would raise to cabinet level of visibility after reviewing it. And so if it had proceeded through all those levels, it would have to go for approval to be signed off to say, yes, employees would have this option.
Only administrative staff will be allowed to work alternative work schedules.
Likely.
So I'm just trying to figure out how is this benefiting children. You know, principals, teachers, as we know, they have their work schedule, and now we're giving people at the administrative office options to have alternative work schedules. If they want to work from home, they can.
Perhaps. So we know that moving forward, a lot of people work remotely. Even though I was out of town earlier this week, I was still online. I had my VPN access, and I was still answering emails from my team. But yes, I didn't clock in Monday and Tuesday. And so we know moving forward, this is going to be a more common practice. It will keep us more competitive with other industries in terms of meeting employee needs. And if we have really talented people, we don't want to lose them from Dallas ISD. We want to have greater flexibility so that they can stay a part of our workforce.
Well, I understand that, but you get to work. I mean, you do that. You just work. I work on Saturdays, Sundays, check your emails all the time. That's just part of your commitment to being a employee and a salary employee. So I'm just trying to understand that, you know, it's not about losing talent, but you're going to give, and what are the criteria to ensure that, what determines that Kay gets to work from home, but Faye won't get to work from home? Is it likability?
I already work from home.
So I'm trying to understand if a school needs something and you're working from home, and are we setting up home offices? Because normally people who work from home, they have a very strict home office with a laptop, and you know, you can kind of see and that check in. They're still in corporate America. That's you, the head person in charge, but there's still in corporate America some strict guidelines for people who work from home. So I'm trying to understand what are our legal policy and our legal on government entity, not, you know, contract, if you're contract labor, but you are a salary employee, and now we can decide that folks can work from home. How does that come together? So I don't. Is this a first read?
Yes.
And so how many employees do we have working remotely now?
2.
2, and I know of one. The other one, who made that decision?
I would have to research who made that decision.
We didn't have a policy in place at the time while they was working from home.
The policy didn't speak to it. So we wanted to add this to add clarity.
Regulations not there yet?
No, I'm waiting for the will of the board. I mean, we have a drafted version of DEA reg, but
I would like to see the regulation. I'm just trying to figure out where's the legal policy for this one. I'm looking. Where's DEA legal? Do you have DEA legal? Can you send me, please, Faye? Okay.
Chief Foreman.
There are lots of industries that have people that work from at home. One of the major questions I would have is, a person that comes into the office incurs an expense of coming into the office on a daily basis. So once they start to work at home, how does that affect their salary?
it does not.
That's a problem. Because usually, don't answer because you might answer too quick. Usually when a person works from home, they usually set up a home office, and there's a tax benefit to that. That's clear. So, and most of them are independent contractors, Mr. Smarty.
Before we get into personalities, for all trustees, I'm just going to say,
and so,
just real quick, from a parliamentary perspective.
Let me finish.
I want to make sure that all trustees.
I had the floor.
You do have the floor, but
finish.
As a presiding officer of this body, I just want to make sure that all trustees know we are not going to debate personalities. For all trustees.
I'm going to finish. Now, my question is that most of them are independent contractors. So if we have a person making $100,000 and decide they want to go home and work from home, do we think that's okay?
Yes, if they're performing their job function, yes.
You think that's okay?
I do. I think if you have a high performer who's committed to getting the work done of this district, if they are seeking an alternative work arrangement, then yes.
And what kind of job would that be? What just give me a couple of examples of what somebody can do from home that they currently do here.
I can give you a couple examples, ma'am. So one is graphic design. Somebody who spends a lot of time at a computer, it's all over the internet or Ethernet, and it can be sent as a product when they finish that work. Technology has numerous applications. Somebody who's really good at Oracle 12, whom we have to consult out with because we can't find enough people. But if we find somebody who would like an arrangement working at home and writes code, Oracle 12, that would be a person worth having if we can make that arrangement. And that's just two big areas, communications to technology, that would have many examples.
So what we're saying is we're talking about not current employees, but creating an atmosphere of people who can work at home?
Trustee Foreman, it could be a hybrid. You could have current employees that this would apply to. You also might hire for some positions that are currently vacant where this also might apply. It's really a case by case.
It would be decided by you or your department?
No, not solely. It would go up through the appropriate division and then would come to a cabinet level review.
So if I've got a person working in procurement,
right,
and they want to work from at home, they would go through the appropriate cabinet level review and then it would come to you.
Well, I'm a part of cabinet, so I would see it at that point.
All right.
Anybody else? Trustee Jones.
Thank you. You know, certainly the modern age, more and more people are cyber commuting and doing things of that nature. I'm a little concerned because we're talking about employees here, not contractors or other types of related parties. We're talking about absolute employees. So I can appreciate we're trying to build in flexibility, no problem with that. But I think what I'd like to see more is examples of where it would apply and where it would not apply, or prospectively who could prospectively be included versus who would not be. And the reason for this is, you know, it's nice to have a culture that comes together as a workforce. So I assume teachers and other people are excluded from this because clearly they've got to be in the classroom. But for administrative or other related roles and responsibilities, IT, whatever, I can see the wisdom. I just want to know who it would specifically apply to and then what the conditions would be in terms of being able to do formal reviews, to do other accountability related oversight of their work performance. The second issue is when you say home, we got people who live in Houston, people who, you know, I also start to wonder, you know, how that changes our geographical relationship to people, because that would mean they don't have to be here. And that opens some other doors. So I'd just like to cover some of this ground before we say this is a good idea, but I appreciate you bringing these types of flexibility